Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here. Sunday, the 12th of March. Just getting ready for the round table discussion.
Western Australia's Labor Premier from 2001 to 2006. He's now Professor and Director of the Graduate School of Government at the University of Sydney. G'day, Jeff.
G'day, Tom.
Katie Hodson-Thomas was a Liberal MP in the WA Parliament from 96 to 2008. She's now Director in Strategic Communications with FTU Consulting in Perth. Hi there, Katie.
Good morning there, Tom. It's actually FTI Consulting.
Oh, sorry, FTI, that's right. And Martin Drum is Senior Lecturer in Politics and International Relations at the University of Notre Dame in Perth. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning, Tom.
Jeff, first to you, how do you account for last night?
Well, I think there's no doubt that the comment that Reece Whitby made in that short interview was a good one. I think the government was not handling the problems of the state well. They've been in for a couple of terms. They raised expectations throughout the mineral boom that anyone would know that at some point it's going to taper off. And for all of those sorts of reasons, they were on the nose. But then, on the other side, you've got Labor building a good team. They had excellent candidates. The leader was very clear in his direction. And when that's the contrast, one side comes out on top, and that's the Mark McGowan team.
A lot of the commentary in coming days will be about this preference deal. Katie, do you think the Liberal government's return became virtually impossible when they did their preference deal with One Nation?
Look, I certainly think it damaged the party's brand. And when you hear rusted-on Liberals saying that they can't stomach the preference deal, you know you're in trouble. And certainly the collapse of the Liberal primary vote demonstrates that there were many Liberals out there that were very unhappy about the preference deal.
Yes, I mean, as soon as that preference deal was announced, Martin, it seemed like the Premier, he struggled to make his case for re-election, didn't he?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think they were behind already at the start of the campaign, so I don't think it's what cost them. It just cost them any opportunity to regain that territory. The whole of the campaign, he was dogged, the Premier was dogged about the One Nation deal. I think it was particularly prominent amongst national reporters that came here because they were interested in the national implications of this. But he couldn't get any oxygen at all to talk about the other things that he was trying to offer.
Yeah, it's not like Barnett was endorsing One Nation's policies. I mean, you think about immigration, Islam, economic nationalism. I mean, Barnett was completely at odds with that, wasn't he, Jeff?
Oh, well, the trouble is, Tom, you can't make those distinctions. You have to be responsible for the decisions you make, and the Liberal Party made a decision to effectively legitimise One Nation, to preference it ahead of its own alliance partner, the National Party in WA. And, you know, as a nation, we've got to start looking at the policies that One Nation are pursuing. They're extreme. And you've got the vaccination issue, the Putin issue, the fluoridisation of the water. I mean, I think the blowtorch went on One Nation, and she was revealed to have policies that really are socially divisive and job-destroying.
To be fair to Barnett, though, he wasn't responsible for that preference.
It doesn't. He's the leader. He has to carry the can.
Right.
And he tried to say that it wasn't his decision and all that. You know, as Martin said, he was on the back foot from the day they made that deal. So the extent of the win to Labor would be partly explained by that deal, but not the win itself.
Katie,
I agree with Katie.
Yeah, Katie, you were a state MP when John Howard was Prime Minister, and he's been in Perth a lot during the campaign. Now, he gave strong support to the deal, calling the Greens, who traded preferences with Labor, as the only real extremist party in Australia. How would you respond to that?
Well, I'm with Jeff on One Nation. I think they're very divisive. Certainly their policies leave much to be desired. Pauline Hanson's autocratic leadership, the lack of rigour in their pre-selection process certainly undermined the Liberal campaign. And I can't concur with John Howard's comments. Ultimately, we paid a heavy penalty with that preference deal. But that aside, you have to commend Mark McGowan on running a very disciplined, professional campaign. The McGowan team stayed on message, and unfortunately for the Liberal Party, we're going to bear the burden of having lost many seats.
Well, let's go to this One Nation primary vote. I mean, it's really quite startling because if you go to the beginning of the campaign, it was something like 13–14% according to most of the best opinion polling data. A few days ago, polls showed it was about 8–9%. Now, on the night, it was barely 5%. Matt, why do you think One Nation crashed so badly?
I think that campaign was an absolute shambles. To get an idea about how bad it was, many of her own candidates, Pauline Hanson's own candidates, openly questioned the deal, said it was rubbish, said that they wouldn't be abiding by it. Quite a few of them actually quit the election before the poll, and their face was still on the ballot, not face, but their name was still on the ballot. And even one high-profile one quit on the day of the poll. I mean, these things, it couldn't have gone much worse. So all of the publicity around One Nation was negative, and I think it was all pretty much own gold. And Pauline Hanson was right at the centre of this.
Well, meanwhile, you've got the Federal Liberal Party really weighing this all up. I mean, Katie, will they learn from this experience of playing footsie with One Nation when you have people like Arthur Sinadina saying that One Nation, quote, is now a lot more sophisticated than it was 20 years ago?
Yes, well, he's entitled to his own opinion. Look, I think that there'll be lots of soul searching in the post-mortem after this election. Job security certainly played a significant role in this campaign. There's no doubt people were very nervous. We've seen a downturn in the economy, and people were questioning the Liberal Party after 2 terms. There was that time factor. And I think they were very bold in their attempts to sell Western power after being in government for 2 terms, and it just didn't resonate with voters.
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, obviously a big setback for the Liberal Party at the state level. How significant is this federally? I mean, will Malcolm Turnbull, the Prime Minister, put more distance now between the Federal Party and Pauline Hanson's One Nation?
Well, certainly, I think that will happen. He's going to have difficulty, though, given some of the statements that have been made by his people in supporting what's happened in Western Australia. But I think the Liberal Party problem in Western Australia is a sort of a Liberal Party problem generally, and that is that they're arguing that we need to have a new economy and to get new jobs and employment and whatever, but they don't seem to have any strategy for dealing with our society and social justice and the way in which we distribute the burdens and benefits of life. And they're just not succeeding in our parliamentary system at the moment because they don't have a strategy to engage working people, to engage lower income people, and every time they come up with a proposal, it seems to be directed against those people. So I think Liberals are really in a mess generally throughout the nation because they do not have a strategy to win people over to their economic program. A program today has to be both economic and social. We saw that in the Hawke-Keating years. And the Liberals, I think, as long as they stick with this strategy, they're going to fail in the parliament and then they'll fail in the electorate.
It's also just worth bearing in mind that 16 years ago, Jeff, the Western Australian election in 2001, that brought you to power.
Yeah.
One Nation won 9.5% of the vote in that election. This time it barely registered 5%.
Yeah, look, you've got to remember One Nation voters and the One Nation party. There's a distinction there.
Oh, yes.
I mean, a lot of people that vote for One Nation are really protesting. You know, they want to send a message and then they go back to where they came from. Now, it's very interesting. Probably most One Nation voters come from the coalition, about 60%, about 40% ex-Labor. But when it comes to the preference distribution, and I think we'll see this in this election, it's more 50-50. So, funnily enough, even though Labor at that time, and we made it clear, One Nation, bottom of the ticket, a lot of their voters had a different view than the party of One Nation. So you can't say every person that votes for One Nation is necessarily supporting Pauline Hanson's policies. They're protesting and wanting to send a message in, and then their vote comes back to one of the 2 major parties at about a 50-50 basis.
If you've just tuned in, you're on RN with me, Tom Switzer, and our Sunday roundtable, Jeff Gallup, Katie Hodson-Thomas, and Martin Drum. We're talking about the carnage last night in the West. Jeff, just quickly to you, what do we know about this new Labor Premier, Mark McGowan?
Oh, excellent, excellent. A person who's really devoted to and interested in the political process and how it works. He was a local councillor. He went into state parliament. He works very hard at being a good leader. He works very hard at trying to work out how you can get into power from opposition, which he's now done. Very serious politician.
Non-unionist too, right?
Very serious politician, not to be underestimated at all.
Non-unionist too. Oh, well, look, the unions kind of odd, given that the unions threw a lot into this campaign, Greg.
Look, people can argue these points, but I found when I was in government as well, privatisation is not favoured by the public. We need an economic reform strategy for the country necessarily, but flogging things off is not the way the public wants you to do it.
We should also stress McGowan is a Fremantle Football Club fan, but leaving that aside, Katie, we're talking about the backlash against privatisation and that power sale, but how will McGowan deal with the heavy debt without much of a plan?
Look, that's a big question. I think they've got a lot ahead of them. Ben Wyatt has certainly held the shadow treasury portfolio for the last 8 years, as I understand. He'll be a steady hand at the helm. I wouldn't be surprised if he reaches out to former Treasurer Eric Ripper for some mentoring and advice. They feel very confident that they can turn this around. That will obviously be something we'll all watch with great interest, but they have an enormous task ahead of them. There's certainly one mandate to cancel the contracts for the Bro 8, and that was always a very controversial policy between both the Liberal and the Labor Party, and I wish them well. I'd just like to add my congratulations to Mark McGowan. He's been in the Parliament since 1996. I've always found him to be very measured, and I think he demonstrated that throughout this election. He is very committed to the state of Western Australia. In his speech last night, I was touched by the fact that he said Western Australia has given him so much. So I believe... But
to be fair, though, I mean, I want to be devil's advocate here on this McGowan. It's his moment of glory, but what's his plan to reduce this heavy amount of debt?
Well, that's for him to demonstrate to the voters of Western Australia. As I said, I think that they've got a lot ahead of them, and I wouldn't want to be in his shoes.
Yeah, Mark McGowan, he distinguished himself from the union movement, even though he got a lot of money from the union movement supporting him. Do you see him as a kind of like a Kevin Rudd figure in Western Australia?
Well, he did actually use a little bit of Kevin Rudd's rhetoric when he said he'd govern for all of Western Australia, Western Australians, I think it was, last night. Look, there's a little bit of that, but there's a little bit else as well, some differences. He has been opposition leader for 5 years, whereas Kevin Rudd had only been opposition leader for 1 year before he won in 2007. And you would hope and expect that he has a better handle on his party as a result, and has solidified his personal imprint on the party. Yes, all those things that you raise are important. You know, addressing debt is his single biggest challenge, and it's operational debt. It's debt associated with the running government. So the only thing that he can do is to drastically reduce operational costs, and that involves things like cutting personnel.
Jeff? Yeah, look, I think you've got to look at the attitude of the people that will be involved in this and the policies they've put forward. Now, he's put a lot of policies forward, very similar in some ways to back in 2001, although the circumstances are different today, about the public service and how we can reorient it to reduce some of the expenditures on operations and whatever. But really, it's the attitude you take. When we came in 2001, it was quite similar situation in terms of budget was a major issue. And the attitude of our government was to deal with it. I think the problem with Colin Barnett's government, and even Colin Barnett himself, he was not interested in this financial management issue. The way he structured his government, the way he spent money in the boom, the way he didn't put aside money to deal with the downturn that was obviously going to come. And this was one of the reasons he's defeated. So the ball is in Labor's court on this. Katie is absolutely correct, a very tough issue. But I'm confident that the attitude of Ben Wyatt, Mark McGowan, Rita Saffioti, the economic gurus there in the government, are very devoted to getting responsible finances.
It just occurred to me that one other difference between McGowan and Rudd, of course, is ministerial experience. So he was a minister in your government, wasn't he, Jeff?
He was. Look, he is a very creative politician. He was my parliamentary secretary, came up with some excellent ideas on how to improve things in Western Australia. He is we've got to now say this is a very distinguished leader who's achieved a magnificent result.
Katie, let's turn to your former colleague, Colin Barnett. Now, if that WA Liberal leadership's bill, I think it was last October, if that had been successful and Barnett was not the leader, would last night have fared any better for the Liberal Party?
Look, I don't deal in hypotheticals. I have to say that Colin certainly resurrected us in 2008 when we looked to be set to lose a number of seats. He came back in...
Okay, there's the upload limit. Back immediately.